Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about the inner voice. It's become topical. There are some new papers apparently on the inner voice that people have when we think. And there are lots of folks who apparently don't have the full inner voice as at least that we use it in casual conversation, the way we refer to it. Now, I don't know deeply about this literature. I don't know about the controls they use and the methods and so forth. But I want to check your intuitions here. A lot of people's intuitions are that, of course, we have an inner voice, an inner language-like voice that we think with. And it's weird if we find someone who apparently might not have all those qualities for their inner voice. And that's the baseline they're coming from, that it's weird not to have the inner voice. But I want to remind you, I want to change those intuitions because a lot of us forget that we didn't evolve language. That is, language is a cultural construction. And this is something I've argued in my earlier book, Harnessed. Actually, and before that, I argued in Vision Revolution and publications of mine. The reason that we have a written language that we can read and write is because cultural evolution shaped writing to fit our brains, which evolved just to see the world. We never evolved to read. So what cultural evolution did, it said, hey, let's shape writing to look like nature, because human brains, their visual systems, which fill half their heads, half their brains, are great at processing visual scenes, natural scenes. So let's make writing look like natural scenes, look like the contour conglomerations that happen amongst objects in the natural world, so that we can harness or trick this visual object recognition system to becoming a reading brain. And so that's how we came to read. But language is much older than that, but still we're talking about hundreds of thousands of years. It is a cultural invention too. And Harnessed, my third book, made the case, a book-length case, that language itself culturally evolved over those epochs of times to sound like something that we were already good at. Hearing and processing the sounds of events around us. The sounds of events, which are like solid objects, which when they hit, they make hits, or they slide, which are like fricatives, and the hits are like plosives, and the things ring, which are like sonorants or vowels. And it's the combinations of these things, like a hit and a ring, which are like syllables. And this is just the beginning of the kinds of regularities that happen amongst solid object events. And you can show that these kinds of regularities, peculiar grammar of how solid objects interact, and the kinds of sounds and patterns they make are found across languages, is the case that I make in Harnessed. We can speak and we have language only because it's a cultural product. It's cultural evolution. It's an invention by cultural evolution for us, which means prior to these hundreds of thousands of years or so that we had spoken language, we were like these other apes. We didn't have language at all. Now we had our emotional expressions, which really is our true first evolution-given language. And this is the topic of Dr. Tim Barber in my most recent book, my sixth book, Expressly Human, Decoding the Language of Emotion. And we had that as our expressive language. And it might have been that our thoughts even were often emotional thoughts about how confident we are or how disdainful we are of Doug or Judy with their confidence about something else. All of these things were certainly part of our internal thoughts as well. But prior to hundreds of thousands of years ago, we were pretty much just us, super smart. We could think. We had internal thoughts well before we ever had spoken language. We had millions of years like that. We had millions of years. All of these animals, way lower than us, the way people like to think about it, are deeply intelligent. Your pets and dogs, they have internal streams of consciousness. They have internal languages of thought where they can manipulate syntactical like sentences of some kind to form propositions of some kind, whether you want to think about it in a sentence-like way or not. But what's normal for humans and other animals is not to have a voice in your head in the way that we think about it. Whatever those internal language-like processes which form thoughts or hypotheses or questions and answers and all of the deliberations that occur was not via a voice, was not associated with a voice, because we didn't have vocal language that sort of mapped onto our internal ways of thinking. So what's weird is that we do have now, a lot of us, voices in our heads when we're thinking. And you could imagine that that's actually less smart in some ways than the folks who were able to do it without that. They were just using the actual package that evolution gave them. Those of us who are thinking with a voice sort of a voice in our head would be like the people that read with their mouth still moving. So they still sort of can't get around that. They're kind of still mistakenly using language, this great invention that turned us into human 2.0s, I've argued in another book. That's fine for communicating to others, but you don't need to communicate to yourself with that language because you already have an internal language of thought that evolution gave us. So I just want to twist these intuitions, twist your baseline about what you think is normal. Thinking with a voice in your head that's talking in a regular old language is not what you should expect is normal. It's not what any other animal does. It's not what we, our Homo sapiens selves, did for almost the entirety of our human history. And that was your science moment. If you're interested in things like this, topics like this, you can read any of my books like Vision Revolution. I mentioned that in regards to the evolution of writing, Harness on the evolution of language and music and how these cultural evolutions harness us, and Human 3.0 on what's next after humans. And I also mentioned Expressly Human, my newest book with Dr. Tim Barber, Decoding the Language of Emotion, and that was your science moment.